What's up? Double tracking Battletoads, bro. You already know. Gotta use the bathroom. I don't know why I wait now. I got 2 minutes. So I'm right back.
That shit's a vibe too. Oh, you got me in stream too? Hey, yo, this dude, bro. We can't fix it now.
I'm using this. Yo, 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 yo. Switch, what up, though? It's your boy, Virgo motherfucking Dynamics. We in the building. You already know. Scuff gang shit.
Yeah, I'm feeling that. I'm feeling that badge. You have to run that.
Type
I
shit,
scuff
type
mine
shit.
up. That shit is hard right there. What?
Shit. So what up there? What up there out there in Twitch land? How y'all doing? How y'all doing? How was everybody's week? How's everybody been? Proper introduction. Everybody's gonna pull up at some point during the stream. Everybody's gonna watch the VOD a little bit later. I appreciate y'all. All viewers, all chatters, all lurkers matters. Shout out to the homie Balls. Chilling with your boy ASAP. Scuffing shit you already know.
No doubt, no doubt.
So I don't do much.
In your chat too, just so you know.
Okay.
On the stream, you got me in the stream.
Oh, I can hear you, yeah. So the plan for today was to let me get out of studio mode. This is annoying. Alright, so the plan for today was to play a little bit of we're gonna go old school, we're gonna go retro and play some motherfucking Legend of Zelda, Link to the Past. The plan was for me to watch like some playthroughs of speed runs or some shit to try to fucking get a little recollection of how the game went, so I didn't be running around like a noob. But I didn't do that because I'd be busy. I got other stuff to do. So we go on noob mode. I beat this game about 100 freaking times, I promise. So maybe as I'm playing it, it should start coming back to me. I'm hoping. So I don't look like too much of a jerk. But I fired up the old Switch. I ain't turned my Switch on in forever. As you can see, we got a bunch of new games. What we got? Fatal Fury 2. Oh, let's go. Double Dragon and Battletoads. That's crazy lit. I don't know what that is. Super Ninja Boy. I played that. I thought this was a fever dream I had too, Super Ninja Boy. It's another game that was kind of like Ape Escape, but it was like, I don't know. I thought it was a fucking fever dream. Oh, Killer Instinct with the infinite combos. Yo, they got wild Battletoads. Battle Mania, let's go. I'm gonna have to play some Battletoads, bro.
Ultra.
Alright, so we're gonna switch over to the Nintendo screen. I tried to make a nice little game screen, but it didn't freaking work. I have to fix it. So hold on, let me see something. Studio mode. I tried to make me a nice little Nintendo game screen, but yeah, didn't happen. I think I should have zagged. Alright, so anyway, we're gonna run it basic. Maybe next time I'll get some nice little backdrop or something like that. Super Mario World, another classic. What else we got? Earthworm Jim 2. What? Yo, they got Fighters History. Bro. Yo, that's crazy. Fighters History, Punch Out classic always. Yo, Fighters History? That's like having Eternal Champions on here. That's crazy too. Doomsday Warrior? I don't know. I probably played that. So I played so many games back in the day, especially for Super Nintendo. I was always playing some random shit. Donkey Kong Country 2. I never liked the Donkey Kong games. I remember when Donkey Kong Country 1 first came out. It was like epic. They had its own little bundle. Its own little SNES bundle. And nah, I wasn't a Donkey Kong. Star Fox, yeah. I fuck with some Star Fox. Breath of Fire. F-Zero. I fuck with F-Zero. This is where we going right here. Y'all. We're going right to Legend of Zelda, Link to the Past. We just want to see what else they got. For Star Fox 1 and 2. Pilot Wings? Bro, Pilot Wings? What they know about Pilot Wings, gang? Super Metroid. I never beat none of the Metroids neither. I think I played the first Metroid, like literally the first Metroid, and I couldn't beat the shit. I couldn't get up the first board. I was too smooth brain for Metroid. I was like, yeah, nah. I just never played no more Metroids after that. Super R-Type, I think I beat this. I'm pretty sure I beat this. This was like my second game I ever bought. This was my second game. What was the first game I had? I want to say it was Ninja Gaiden. Besides Mario, of course, because Mario came with the shit. But I think it was Ninja Gaiden. I think I had this shit, Super R-Type. I got Shadowrunner. Shadowrunner was my shit for mad long. RPG game. Peacekeepers? Bro, they got Peacekeepers? Yo. Yo. Yo, having Peacekeepers is crazy. Alright, let's do the Zelda thing. Link. Oh shit, long ago, in the beautiful kingdom of Hyrule, surrounded by mountains and forests, legends told of an omnipotent and omniscient golden power that resided in a hidden land. Fucking narrative time, gang. Many people aggressively sought to enter the hidden golden land. No one ever returned. One day, evil power began to flow from the golden land. Come on now, get a little saucy with this. So the king commanded 7 wise men to seal the gate to the land of golden power. So y'all go do that shit, yo. The seal should have remained for all time. But somebody fucked around and found out. But when these events were obscured by the mist of time and became legend, don't fuck with time travel, folks. If you find a time machine, leave it alone. It really turns out good. A mysterious wizard known as Anangim came to Hyrule. Aghanim? I never heard that part. I never read that part. With evil magic, he began to make the sentence of the 7 wise men vanish one after another. Oh! In the time of destiny for Princess Zelda is drawing near. Alright, we're gonna start from the tippy top. New playthrough, even though I ain't really getting nowhere on the other one. I found 2 stars.
Look at it. It's like a relic, bro. You got white gloves on?
Yeah, bro, it's that old school. Help me. Please help me. Uh-oh. I am a prisoner in the dungeon of the castle. My name is Zelda. The wizard Aghanim has done something to the other missing girls. Not only I remain, Aghanim has seized control of the castle and is now trying to open the 7 wise men's butts. Not their butts. Seal. Okay, sorry. I am in the dungeon of the castle. You said that in the first place, yeah. Please help me. Well, I reckon that's what I'm here for, princess. Hey, eat pizza. 3 princesses. And I'm almost out of pizza. Alright, so I know you can run in this shit, but you gotta get like shoes or something like that. And I obviously don't got shoes. You can pick up rocks, but you gotta like get gloves. You gotta get all the drip basically. You gotta get shoes, you need some gloves. I think you need a coat. Obviously you can't go that way. Alright, now I remember this part. You gotta like find dude. They like in the freaking what you call it? A church or some shit like that. Like you could pull out and bust those up, you could blow them up or some shit like that. How does this game work, bro? How do you get to the map? There you go. Yeah, I gotta go in there. But you gotta like sneak in that shit. I forget how to do this. Bruh. I know there's a hidden path from outside of the castle to the garden to the inside. Let's see, we're going the right way. She's trying to tell me something. She's trying to tell me, yo, bruh, you're going the wrong way. Is you coming or no? Excuse me. It's not this way. I gotta go like, you can't go over there though, because these dudes is blocking, right? You gotta go this way. Yo, but I really do not remember this game. This is crazy. Here go the castle. You gotta swing a right. I know that much. Right? You find that shit. Go bam, 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 bam. Oh yeah, let's go. Alright, so run around here. You run in the hole. You jump in the hole, right? Run around here. You go do. Give me the sword, pops. Yeah, give me that. Sword and shield. Some niggas a sword and shield, man. Oh, I slashed this shit. He didn't even give a fuck. Okay. You right, I deserve that. We out. Yo, can I use this to move? Maybe I don't round use that. This time I feel good. I can charge this bitch up too, right? Yeah, right? My poke going. Come on, gang. Hit your ass with the spinner room. Come on, gang. That's not right though. Neither you supposed to like. Can't go in there. There you. Oh yeah, you can. Yeah, bro. I've been having a bad day, bro. It's been a bad couple of days, bro. Like, I ain't been in the best of moods, gang. Also, welcome in, homie. I appreciate you, Albert. You already know. I'm not in the best of moods. I was tempted. I'm stuttering and shit. I was tempted to just not even fucking stream this now, but I'm like, no, I'm not gonna play in the stream fucking 5 days out and then not do it. Well, here I am. Yeah, I'm trying to push through, bro. that I said I was gonna do. Yeah, welcome in. Appreciate you. How's your week? How's your day? How's life treating you? I know you could like, it's like a secret portal or some shit. Football as well with your homie. Let me try to get myself up here because I can't see y'all. I'm sitting there smoking this weed. I ain't gonna drink none. That's gonna have the opposite effect. I'll smoke some blunts though. I'm sitting there smoking this weed. I ain't gonna drink none. That's gonna have the opposite effect. I'll smoke some blunts though. We're doing this. Like stop in. Oh yeah, stay off the dome. Hold you. Oh yeah. I'm not. I can't do the drinking thing, gang. Yeah. Nah. Not when I'm bad-minded. Hell no. Especially not when I'm bad-minded. I might end up bad-minded from drinking. If I start out that way, oh no. Nah. Oh my god, look, I can't even play Zelda, bro. Oh, I swear, bro. Yeah, I don't really do the drinking drinks. I smoke though. I've been smoking a lot. Yeah, don't say la vie, you know what I mean? It's part of life, you know? But it ain't always all good. I know I'm about to fumble through this game like a noob. Y'all, you would never think I beat this game. I used to play this shit for fun and just run through it. Like, I do not remember this game. I think I smoked all those memories. I changed the chat to look more retro. Oh yeah, Alva, that's what I did. I changed the chat to look more retro. Yeah, that's what I did. Go with that. I didn't try to put some other shit on here and it just didn't work, so I said fuck it. I just went with the stock image. I didn't do that. I made it retro like you said, yeah. I like your version better, gang. If it's a theme, yeah, you're right. I'm vibing with you. We bopping together, feel me? Well, I'm supposed to go up here, over here, down here. Nice little retro vibes, I feel you. Old school vibe for your old school bro. Come on, give me the key. Give me the key. Oh, you ain't got it, gang. You ain't even got it? Oh, I can't go up there yet. Got to find the key. You have the key. Oh, don't kill me, though. Give me the key, but don't kill me about it. Yeah, give me that. Oh, I got a boomerang, gang. Let me throw my boomerang in my mouth. That's what you got, like hour left of work, hour and a half. Yeah, you don't got like 9 late ass hours. Oh, get him, get him. Yeah, I'm here to save the princess and eat pizza. I'm almost out of pizza. Oh yeah, look at big swingy bullmans. Come on now. What's that, a mace? I see you get 8-bit mace. It's 16-bit mace. How many bits is this? I don't even know how many bits this is. Oh, let me give him a swingy. A swingy, you know what I mean? Let me give a power attack. Put some funk on this thing. Sweet! Sweet. Put some funk on this thing. Soy. The big key off his ass. Give me the big angry key. Yeah. Some brightly. Talk to Shorty. Yo. It's good gangology. I fear the worst for my father. The wizard is an inhuman fiend with strong magical powers. Do you understand? Yeah, I got you, gang. Alright, let's get out of here before the wizard notices. She's from Uganda, bro. I know a secret path. But first, we have to go to the first floor. Let's go. She from fucking... Our princess is from Uganda, you heard? She's not from Hyrule, she from Uganda. That's how she talk. Speak, oh, Leek. I love you so much. Yeah, type shit. I mean, I pulled through the stream. I mean, I'm gonna try to start doing that more this shit. Like, whenever I say I'm gonna do some shit, I'm gonna fucking do this shit. Especially when it comes to streaming shit. I'm hoping it pays off in dividends, because it don't seem like it is. I don't know if you peep game, but I'm down. Down three viewers. I don't know what I did wrong, but fuck y'all too. Well, 3 followers, not viewers. Down 3 followers. I don't know what I did, but fuck y'all too. Saito, I mean, we gonna say the princess. We gotta take her to game. We gotta take her to the throne room, right? Or nah? Nah, right? Or nah? Right? And I'm gonna the boss's ass. Boss. Come on, princess, this way. I'll save you. That's how Link talk. Link is a fucking weep. Come on, princess. Come on this way. I'll save you, princess. She said, Link, why do you talk this way? Why do you speak like this? You're so funny, Link. You're so funny. I think it's okay, princess. I'll save you. I have a shield. Oh, you off this, princess? Yeah. Got the light. Yeah, we got light. We got all that. Let's go. We got tricks. We got gifts. We got lights. We got arrows. We got bombs. We got 16 green rupees. Let's go. Push this shit, girl. Put your back into it. You can do it. Uh-oh. In the darkness. Watch for the rats. Yo, the rats be holding goods, bro. I don't know how the rats get rupees, but I'll take them. Because we're going to need all these coinage. Give me the coinage. Give me the coins. Princess, do you have any coins for me? When I finish this mission, you must give me coins. You are rich, you are a princess, I know you got it. You cash at me, princess. Yo, y'all think Zelda got the OnlyFans? Probably not, right? Link do. Link is a big fuck boy. Bro, don't kill me, fucking snakes. Keep up these snap a chunk, a snuff gang lug one chunk for him. Oh my god, what is this? Oh my god, snakes and bats, what is this? Lions and tigers and bears, oh my. Yo, let's get it. Give me the key, gang. Give me the fucking key. Gripped up. Uh-oh. We're in the sewers, gang. Smells like poop. It smells like a lot of poop in here. Princess, I would like the way so we do not step in poop. It smells like a lot of poop in here. Do not let you step in poop. He said, oh, Link, you're such a gentleman. The way you light the way for me, it make it easier for me to see. I appreciate you. I appreciate you so much. Oh, Link. There's no problem, princess. I will save you. There's no problem. But this is why I'm here. Link sound like the king from Coming to America. It is why I am here. I'm here to save you. Either way, lose 3. That's why I said, bro, I'd rather 10 lions than 100 sheep. You know what I mean? So if I lost you, I wasn't meant to have you, you heard? Pick stones and catch bones, you heard? Scuff gang shit. Lord, these whites. I will kill the whites. I'm a exterminator. I do 2 jobs. I save the princess and I exterminate all the whites in the castle. They better have my money. Sad with the stick. Hold on, Alva. That might be a little racist, bro. I don't know, bro. That might be, you know what I mean? You might be on the line, bruh. You might be on the line. Talk about the dude with the basket. Oh, we made it. We made it to the church. Ironically, Zelda Hyrule is the only place where they sneak you through the back door of the church. It's a good thing. It means safety. That's usually not a good thing. Secret tunnels and shit. Yes, I understand it all, sir. Oh, we got a heart, gang. You found a heart container, so these shits make your maximum health grow up. Alright, we're gonna start our adventure. What you said? Meet the elder of the village and get the master sword. That's the idea. Virgo, be careful out there. I know you can save Hyrule. Bro, if I don't, we all fucked. So we better hope I can. Go on FanDuel and bet on me. Go high, bet the high on FanDuel. I know I need these coins. Here we go. Oh shit, he was hiding in the grass. Hiding in the bushes like a creep. In the bushes? It means outside the church in the bushes. That's crazy. Oh! They tried to, oh, they got bombs outside the church in the bushes. That's crazy. Oh, another one. Another perv. Look, pervy. Danger. Put that nigga with a bush. I'm gonna beat you with a bush, sir. I go back. I think I fucked my controller up just now. Oh, okay. Map is triangle. All right, so I gotta get the master sword from the elder, right? So I gotta go right there, right? So to the left, to the left, to the left, to the right. No offense, respectfully. Told my dudes with the snakes in the baskets, you know what I mean? Told my sons with the snakes in the baskets. No shade. The snake in the basket man's them. Snake in the basket man's them. Yo, how do you like come out of this when you want to? This is annoying. This is gonna annoy me. Start. Okay, back. Map is triangle. Okay, back. That was annoying me already. I'm not the best of moves for the bullshit. Yo! You with a bush. Yo, you gotta get the gloves, boy, so I can pick up rocks and just smack. That look crazy. I might gotta add that as emo. Alright, so Master Sword is on the boards. I know that much. But you can't get the Master Sword until you could fucking unlock it. You gotta get... I don't remember, bro. I didn't get this shit in my first little playthrough. I just tried. I didn't get that far. I have time for all that. Right, we gonna figure it out, though. Let me see. I tell you a fortune? Hell no. I know that's a ripoff. I know that. I remember that. Don't pay them motherfuckers for nothing. Pay them no mind. They ask you for your rupees. Say nope. Alright, so we gotta go. Triangle? Yep. Alright, right here, right? Take a left right here. Fuck your sign. Is this the elder? Whoa! Oh, it's you, Virgo. What can I do for you, young man? Give me the sword. The elder. Oh, no one has seen him since the wizard began collecting victims. God damn, y'all just sat back and just let him snatch niggas up. Yeah, maybe. She said this shit man nonchalant, like, yeah, that's what he doing. What, Master Sword? Well, I don't remember the details exactly, but... It's always a but. Long ago, a prosperous people known as the Hylia inhabited this land. Legends tell of many treasures that the Hylia hid throughout the land. The Master Sword, a mighty blade forged against those... I'm blind, bro. Forged against those with evil hearts is one of them. People say that now it is sleeping deep in the forest. Yeah, that's what they say. Do you understand the legend? If I say no, she's gonna say it again, huh? Yeah, I think I understand what you said, lady. Anyway, look for the elder. There must be someone in the village who knows where he is. Yeah, I was hoping that was you. But I guess not. You take care now, Virgo. I'll try, my lady. What you got in these pots over here, gang? Hoi! 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 You ain't got no bread, broke ass old lady. I always wonder what these was. Are these like stoves? Let's see what you got in the pots now. Hoi! 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 Oh, I thought you tried to tuck something when I left. I'm trying to tuck shit when I leave, gang. Need those rupees, don't be selfish. Alright, so the Master Sword is not in there. Okay, let's check the grass house. Who's in the grass house? Pretty sure it's not in here. It's something about this house, though, I remember that's wonky. And this dude right here. I forget what it is, though. I'm not liking it. Let's talk to him and see. Yo, Virgo, this house used to be a hideout for a gang. See, I remember that. Something like that. For a gang of thieves. What was their names? What was their leader's name? Oh, yeah, his name was Blonde. He hit him. Bright lights a lot. Sounds precarious. Sounds awfully precarious. Uh-oh, puzzle time. I suck at puzzles. Watch the smooth brain go. Smooth brain, go! Get 0 chess. Watch this. It's fucking smooth brain. Oh, yeah, because you can't push one. You only can push it one time. You can't push it twice. Oh, I got one. I got one, gang. Hold on, wait. Oh, you can't push that one at all. Fuck your face. Oh, we can't push that one at all either. Nah, that's like a trap. That's a trap. It's a trap. Oh, let me try that again. They gonna reset it or is it gonna leave it like that? Hold on. It's a trap. Shit feels like a trap. Charge my headphones. It's just dying. Let me smoke some fucking pot. Nah, but not for nothing. Streaming kind of puts me in a little bit of a better mood. I don't want to come on here and be crabby and fucking I already don't get no views. I don't want to give motherfuckers a reason to not watch my shit. Like this crabby motherfucker. So yeah. Yeah, bro. All right, so I did that first. I pushed that one down first, that one down. Yo, bro, I don't know how to do this because you only can push it one time, so this don't go nowhere. You can't drag it. This don't go sideways. You can't move the chest. That goes down, right? I can push that down, then out. Then that's gonna be the same shit that I did last time. I still can't get to that one. Like, how do you do this, gang? You push this down, push that over, you get to that one, right? So you only meant to get one at a time. You got to come back and get everyone single, like, I mean. So I push this, right? Smooth brain. I'll push this. I get in here and get to this one. This go up. That goes up. I mean, you can't move these no more, though. How do you get to this one? This thing got 3 blocks in front of it. How do you do that? Bro, make that make sense. I'm gonna try one more time. We're gonna do this one more Guineas. One more time, please. Let's try it again. One more chest. Let's see if we try to 100% this shit. First try, first try. Down, no, down, no. Down right, down, down right, and down, down, no. Because then that would be blocked, no. Down, no. Bruh. Albert, help me out here, gang. Help me out here, gang. What we talking about? Right? Down, no. Down, no. Because you're down, over, and down. Same shit I did. I need to get to that one. Down. No, no, no. It's a trap. It'll make you feel stupid. It's a trap. This is a self-esteem debuff. Debuff for your self-esteem right there. Big debuff. Type shit, type shit. Yeah. Alright, so we still trying to find the village elder, right? Alright, bet. Say Lessington. Alright, who's in the cave? Who's in the cave? Oh shit. Sinister music. You know, you're gonna jump out and bite me in the dick. You gotta jump out and bite you in the dick music right there. Cover your dick if you hear that. You walk down the street, you hear that? Cover your dick. Bite the shit out your dick. Hey, here is Virgo, the wanted man. Soldiers, anyone? Oh, she snitched on me? That's crazy. I'm gonna body him anyway. See what happened? Hold on. I'm not gonna this bitch door. Yo. Hold on. She got a back door? Cause she just validated. Hold on, yo. Put this shit up. About to huff and puff and blow her house down. Yo, Turban son, you saw that shit, Turban gang? We was just talking about you, homie. What's good with you? 100 rupees? I only got 181 rupees. Alright, we're gonna take that. Now I only got 81. I couldn't get a deal for being a Hero Haru. There's no Hero Haru deal. Hero Haru discount. That's crazy. It's something with this fucking this shit right here too. You pull it? Nah, bro. Audemars try to kill you, bro. Yeah, they got snitches in Haru, bro. Telling everything they know, bro. Running their lips, bro. She snitched ASAP, too. As soon as she saw me, she ain't try to get my side of the story or none of that. You think she gonna do the same thing? What's up, lady? You gonna tell me too? Rumors say you kidnapped the princess. I kidnapped the princess? How that happen? Who started that rumor? Yo, Twitter crazy, bro. Twitter is crazy, bro. They go crazy on Twitter, bro. They just say anything on Twitter, gang. Look, give me a running from me. It's just crazy. I'm leaving. I don't even appreciate your boy over here. He spent off. So as he saw me, he spent off, but then teleported over here. Watch it. He got magic powers and shit. Look, this nigga. Look how fast he is. He ran around the whole planet and came out the other side. Oh, son's sick. He got COVID. Yo, I can't go out because I'm sick. Yeah, you got COVID. I don't even know why I'm in here. Where my mask at? People say I caught this cold from the evil air that is coming down from off the mountain. Sniff, sniff. Yo, don't be sniffing over here, gang. I got shit to do. Like, I can't be down for the next 2 weeks. I just got this job. My workers' comp ain't up like that. This is my bug catching it. I use it when I'm better. But for now, yeah, I'll take that. Got my bug catching that. You brought with the bug catching that. There may be some other things you can catch with it. COVID, nigga, yeah. He sneezed all over this shit and gave it to me. I'm about to get SARS. Little sick little nigga. What you got in these drums over here? Oh, you got some hearts? I'll take the heart fixtures. See, that's how you know he got COVID. He got extra hearts and shit. This is Moderna hearts. And Pfizer hearts. Hold on, will they ban me for saying Moderna? You can't say Moderna on Twitch, can you? You can't say that shit, can you? Can't say Pfizer on Twitch. Hi Virgo, sorry about my yard. It's a little overgrown. Thanks for visiting. I'm glad to have company to talk to. I will tell you an interesting story. I can't see, bro. There was a lake swimming with Zoras at the source of the river. This is like blue letters too. That shit's really fucking me up. At the source of the river, but it's hard to find. The Trestle Zora can turn people into fish. What's funny about that? What's funny about people getting turned into fish? You got a sick sense of humor, sir. I love to see that. Look, your old twisted ass. I'll turn you into a fucking fish. How would you like it? Like fish sticks? Bet you like fish sticks. You look like you like fish sticks. I'll take care of y'all for you since you so weird. You stay in the house, so you don't gotta come outside and do nothing. Just stay in the house. I'll take care of y'all for you, gang. Don't come out here with that weird shit. Stay in the crib, you heard? Got you. Mumble, my son really liked to play the flute. Hey, yo! But he went to look for the golden power and has not returned. I wonder where he is and what he's doing now. He gonna fall back to sleep while you talking to me. That's some rude shit. Whoa! I saw her. A very nice young lady at the waterfall of wishing in the hills where the river begins. Virgo, you should meet her at least once. I'm sure you will like her. She must got the yeeks. She got the yeeks. She yeeked up. Tell me more, old man. She double cheeked up. What's she looking like? She got an Instagram? What's her Instagram? I'll let your boy. What she got? You don't look like you got a phone. You don't got a phone, old ass nigga. Nigga don't be on social media. Old nigga. Maybe if I do enough chores, dude will stop running from me. He'll be like, he's a cool guy. I saw him chopping everybody's grass and shit. Nah, I don't want none of that, gang. I might need those bombs, though. I think I'm gonna be able to find some bombs somewhere. I feel like I get some bombs from somewhere over here. Besides that. Fucking Twitter, bro. Always blame Twitter, bro. Push come to shove, blame fucking Twitter, bro. Fucking Twitter fingers. Fucking Twitter gangsters. Bow, bow, bow. Yo, low-key, that music is kind of a vibe. What he about to say? Some slick shit? Yeah, Virgo, now I'm quarreling with my younger brother. I sealed the door to his room. Yo, that's child abuse, gang. You can't really seal your fucking little brother in his room like that, gang. You gonna end up where I work at. You better chill out, bro. Like, I'm calling CPS on you. All that's crazy. I'm a mandated reporter, bro. I gotta report shit like that. I gotta report fucking child abusive behavior, gang. You can't be doing that type shit. Definitely don't tell me about it, fucking asshole. Trying to make me lose my license? Fucking wrong with you? Fucking people, bro. I gotta get out of here. What's wrong with these people in Hyrule, gang? What's wrong with them? Niggas don't cut their yard. Niggas locking their little brothers in the room. Pay me 20 rupees and I'll let you open one of my chests. Nah, I'm not paying you 20 rupees to touch your chest, bro. You can keep what's inside. You can keep what's inside. Ugly. Trying to make me give you money to touch your chest. What's wrong with these people? I'm out of here. I came here for a reason and I did not fulfill my mission. I came here to find the village elder and I did not find his old funky ass. Where's he at? Trying to follow the smell of Ben Gay. And the sound of Marvin Gaye. These old niggas like Ben Gay and Marvin Gaye. Like this right here. So you get the ham, you can hit that down. Bink. And check those bushes. I don't know what's in them though. Alright, we're gonna go up this a ways. This is the fortune teller lady, right? Bro, where is the old dude at, gang? Okay, this is the fucking forest. I hate the forest here because this little shit right here. There's another little thing in here too that be beating you up. It's like a dude that be stealing your shit. Is it him? Hey kid, this is a secret hideout for a gang of thieves. Don't enter without permission. By the way, I heard that one of our ex-members is staying at the entrance of the desert. They just tell everything they know, boy. I tell you. I'm gonna tell your boss you told me that. Loose lips sink ships, you heard? I know you go this way, you gotta grab this little mushroom, because the witch lady wants the mushroom. I remember that. I never figured out what to do with the fucking mushroom, though, after you give it to her. I never figured out what the point of it is. Alright, you're gonna try to jack me. Whoops! Sweep on him. Right? Sweep on him. This is where the master sword is at. But you can't fuck with it, because you gotta get, like... One, you can't read this shit, yeah. You can't read this shit. This is written in freaking... fucking Klingon or some shit like that. I don't read Klingon. The shit written in Dothrakian. I don't read Dothrakian. Yeah, this little dude right here, he be trying to jack you. He take your coins. He get me for something. What he got me for? He ain't get me for nothing that time, I don't think. Oh, I could have caught her with the net, gang. Hold on. I'm slacking. I could have swooped her up. How you get out of that? Nah, I use my net. Oh, there it goes. Whoops. I could have caught her with the net, gang. We could have had a fairy, gang. Slack just now. Oops. Oops. Yo, where is the old dude at? Yo, don't kill me, gang. Oh, I think I know where he at. Do I know where he at? He said he went somewhere. What did he say he went to? Hold on. Let me go up. No, he's not there, bro. They keep telling me to go here. He's not there. I promise you he's not in there. Alright, we're gonna go up and to the right. Bro, where's the old dude at? I really don't remember. I have no freaking clue where he's at. I'm about to Google this shit. I'm about to YouTube. I'm go YouTubers. Well, I got my sword so I can fuck motherfuckers up. They can't stop me from going where I want to go. Yo, don't die, Link. No internet, you screw. Yeah, that was me back in the day, bro. And I originally played this game. Going on the internet wasn't the thing. Either you had one of those, what they was called, Game Pro, magazines. If you ain't have a Nintendo Power, Game Pro was for Sega. Nintendo Power was for Nintendo, obviously. So if you ain't have them shits, you was assed out. Or Game Genie or some shit like that. Yeah, you was just an asshole that couldn't beat the game in the hood. Come on, block that with my shield. Shield. Come on, bro. What in the 8-bit? Come on, gang. Come on, gang. I swipe you. Yo, I need some heartage. I need 2 hearts. The boy's down 2 hearts. I'm down 2 hearts and three followers, y'all. Yo, these bush creepers is getting on my nerves. Nah, I know not to swing at his ass. He gonna shock the shit out. She got it here. Red powder, green powder, blue powder. I forget what any of that shit is for. Want that shit? You can have it, lady. I give it to her. Yeah. Come back to the shop later for something good. Alright, go ahead, take that, boo, huh? She about to make me some meth. She gonna make something good. Yo, I got blew by a bush bomb, bro. Alright, so we're gonna save and continue, obviously. Start from Virgo's house, start from the sanctuary. We're gonna start from my house, because it's a very, very, very fine house. Yeah, facts. Back to when you actually had to use a guidebook, bro. You ain't have the internet. You ain't having none of that. You had to hope somebody beat the shit before. You go to their crib and watch them do it. I hope you go back to your house and do the same shit. This was one of the well, Super Nintendo period was like the first not the first console, but the first wave of like real save and continue games. Like saving and continue wasn't even the thing, bro. Like once you died, it was over with. You died? Nah, start from the beginning, start back from the title screen, nigga, push start, insert coin, and start all over again. Which is sucker ass. It wasn't no save and continue and save states and all that and respawning and races and all that. What? Once you died, you got 3 men, right? We're gonna give you 3 shots. Do this thing and get this thing right. After those 3 men, we're gonna give you 3 continues. Know what I'm saying? 3 times 3, ultimately you got 9 men. We're gonna give you 9 shots to get this thing right. If you can't get this thing right in 9 shots, look, scrap. You on your own. And that's how I went. Start over and try it again. Don't cry. You better not cry, or your mom's gonna make you turn the game off. Don't cry. Just start over and try it again. As soon as you cry, it's over. Or you crying because you can't beat him? All right, turn it off. Don't worry about it. Don't cry. Bison keep beating you? Can't beat Bison? Don't cry about it. No continues. Actually, Street Fighter was one game that let you continue. Once you turned that shit off, it was no continues. You gotta start from the beginning. Once you resetted that shit. But Street Fighter did give you infinite continues. I will heal your wounds. I only had a half a wound. I shouldn't even took that. I should have let that cook. That little boo-boo. Used to give my sister the controller. That was my brother. He used to give me the controller. I used to actually play video games. I'm trash, bro. I used to be decent at video games. I tell you, I stopped playing video games my whole 20s, bro. Like I was like, even before that, I started playing ball. I was heavy into basketball. I think I was playing basketball all day long, every day, for a little minute. Started right into the Waymans and started messing with the Waymans and all that though. Oh really, Virgo, I am surprised. A young man like you is searching for the sword of evil's bane. Not just anyone can use that weapon. Legend says only the hero who has won the 3 pendants can wield the sword. Do you really want to find it? Of course. Good. As a test, can you retrieve the pendant of courage from the East Palace? If you bring it here, I will tell you more of the legend and give you a magical artifact. You promise? Now go forward to the palace. Yeah, I need bombs, gang. You better not lie to me, old man. I know where you live. Fucking come back and rumple your stilt skin. Fucking lie to me, old man. Oh gosh. I'm getting attacked by fucking one of those punchy things. Oh god, it's another one. Get out of here, punchy thing. Get out of here, punchy bounce back thing. Okay, screams. Take the steps. Is it a shortcut? Shortcut? Light pack? Light pack? Oh my god. Trying to cut me off. You saw the setup? I saw the setup coming. He tried to hit me off at the pass. I saw you with my shotgun gun. I saw you, motherfucker. Spank your boots. Ski patch your sweeps. You're fired. Both y'all fired. They ain't gonna try to stop me. They fucking fired. I guess I go that way. Oh shit. Hit that. I know I gotta kill this. Let's kill him. Kill. Kill. Oh! Bubble wobble. Oh, don't be a noob. Oh, the big bubble, that's fucked up. No dodging that. Take the heart. Heartology. Okay, skeeps. Oh, skull dudes. With the evasion window. We got evasion mantles. Oof. Look at the sweeps. That's like where that sound came from. Sweeps. Shit came from Zelda. Sweeps. Oh, we got the map. Got the map. Oh, more skull bones then. We just came from that way, right? Oh shit. Came from that way, went in a big circle, so we gotta go back out this way. Yeah, okay. Alright. So you want that big chest ultimately. Go through this door. Scoops. Uh-oh. Bone Man's then. Back up, Bones Mans. Give me some space. Okay, we gotta find the switch before we activate some bullshit. Oh, Bone Man them. Oh, you can crack them with pasta. Watch this. Kapow! I think we gotta actually kill all of them too, right? To get this shit to open. Split it! Oh, I missed Bone Man's. I get a 2 for 1. I get a 2 for. Ah, hell no, they split up. He said, you go left, I'll go right. Give me a 2 for. I'll box you in the corner. Alright, come on, we out. The chest. Oh, we got the map and the compass. No combination. That's what you want. Don't get lost. Don't get lost in the sauce. What they should say. Virgo, it is I, Sahara Sasha. I can talk to you telepathically when you touch these tiles. Here is a hint. You can use the treasure hidden in this palace to defeat armored foes. Ooh. Ooh. I can use the treasure in this palace to defeat armored foes. Uh-oh, got 2 arrows. Then I walk in the room and get 2 arrows. Little foreshadowing. Good job, guys. Spoiler alert. Let me grab this. 5 more arrows. Good job, guys. Wonder what those are for. I had to go this way. It feels right. It feels like the right way. Uh-oh. 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 I should have grabbed that little rupee before I dipped in here. Oh! Chill, ball beans. Chill, bro. Bro, bro. Poke you out in the corner. Oh, got the key. I got your key. Is that all that's in here? Is that key? Yeah, no door, no door, no door, no door, no door, no switch, no nothing. Yeah, get back out. Right down. Oh! Oh, get out the way, get out the way. Oh, give me that. No, get out the way. Here's the key. Do that. Alright, run across there. We was down there before. Now we up here. Okay. Keep going, keep going. Slice, slice. Slice. And slice, and slice. And slice, 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 slice. Kill, kill. Yo, Bone Man's got the agility, gang. Got the hop skis, boy. I'm gonna serve you with that pot. Oh shit! Oh shit, it was a setup. It was a trap. Oh, I got the big key. The big angry key. Now run away. Run away. Not that way. It's a trap. Fucking traps, bro. Right, obviously. Don't smooth brain that and push the other one. Wait, now we back where we started at, but this is the big room, right? Yay. The big room for the big key. So you can smack it. Smack it. I need some hearts before I go in the room. Can I get some hearts? Please, please. Oh, I have a bow now. Oh shit, bone man from the ceiling. It's raining bones. No, get boned. No. Don't get boned. Don't bone me, bro. Oh shit. Oh shit. Wait. Yeah, I need to see the game. Man, can you even kill these dudes? I guess you can. He on my heels. Fire! Yo, die, dude. I need pots. No! Sacrificed myself for a heart and then died. Do not save and continue. What's the difference? Is it saving always better? Right, do I still got the big key or no? What we doing? They gonna do all that all over again? This way I can check that. My inventory? Oh yeah, I still got the big key. We out. Well, so this game is pretty forgiving. Not that harsh. That's probably why I was able to beat this shit back in the day, huh? Probably why I was able to do it. I mean, you gotta run through the shit again, I guess. But I see this little cuts, this little dips you could dip inside of, like right here type shit. Oh, your mother's a fucking whore. Yo, I need some hearts again, bruh. Give me hearts. Give me hearts. Give me hearts. You don't buy hearts? Son of a bastard. So I gotta go down here, over there, up there. In there. I know it's to the right, right? Oh no, this is the throne room. Yay. Fucking hearts. I shouldn't have to go through all this shit like all over again, right? I should be able to just jump down there. Yay, hearts. Oh, same switch. Right? This is the way, right? Bro, you gotta do all this shit over again? That's what you get for sucking. Alright, so go up. I go up. Not now. Right? It's the walk of shame, I guess. Cross. Get in the room this time. Light this shit. Grab this pot. He's gonna come to life, but he's not gonna be. Eradicate his face. That's gonna go out. I'll put that on. I'll take all those jewels. He's gonna do the same shit. Over here. Like the little worm dude gonna jump in the way of my pot right now. See? Oh, they fucking froze the screen and made me throw it. I tried to turn. Bastards. I can shoot with my freaking arrows though, right? I got arrows. What's that? Yeah. Come here. Let me shoot your face. Yo, what the fuck? That light the dark is nasty, huh? That shit takes like 3 frames to change. It's like 3 frames. Oh shit. Oh shit. Oh shit. Oh, fuck you guys. Okay. Eat that. Okay, don't you know? You got a pot, don't you know? You don't start none of your nonsense, okay? None of your nonsense. You got a pot, don't you know? Alright. No, no, no. Yes. Oh, you fucking bony, bro. You gotta shoot him with an arrow. I think he's pot proof. Low key. Like 2 arrows, right? Yeah. 2 arrows to the chest, then you're dead. Got a double arrow in your mans. Right, grab this beak. I guess I don't think they are vulnerable to pots. I don't miss. Fucking loser. Ah, your mother, you ran down on me, you fuck. I got my heart back. Let's go. Come on, open your eye. Open your third eye. Open your third eye. I'm gonna put an arrow in it. Oh shit. Force flow. Oh shit. Don't die. Don't die. Walk of shame if you die. Walk of shame if you die. Walk of shame if you die. Get good. Of course. Wrong way. No, don't get hit. Don't get hit. You're dying. You're dying. You're losing it. You're blowing it. Now I know not to stand in the middle. I know that's not right. Oh, I miss. Bruh. Hit him. Look at him. No. Stop sucking. No. 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 Fucking hell yeah. 1 HP in the dream. He tried to fucking drop it on me, bro. Dropping this dumper on your boy. Tried to dumpy on me. Yo, your man was dropping a dumpy on me, gang. He dropped a dumper on me, bro. I'm gonna turn red. That's how I knew it was up. He turned red. He started dropping like it's hard. Dropping like it's hard. When the pips in the crib, huh? I got all my hearts back, y'all. I'm not about to die. +1. Yo, that was fucking crazy, bro. 1 HP in the drizzing. I did not want to do that walk of shame again. I had to come through in the clutch. Nigga, I got your pendant. Oh, you got the pendant of courage. Now I will tell you more of the legend. 3 or 4 generations ago, well, how many was it, old man? 3 or 4? An order of knights protected the royalty of the Helia. These knights of Hyrule were also guardians of the pendant of courage. Well, they fucked up, didn't they? Unfortunately, most of them were destroyed in the Great War against the evil that took place when the 7 wise men created their seal. Among the descendants of the Knights of Hyrule, a hero must appear. I see. Virgo, I believe you. You should get the remaining pendants and carry this with you. This is a treasure. Passed down by my families, passed down by the families of the wise men. I want you to have it. Oh, I got boots, gang. He gave me the 11s, bro. I got the all red 11s, gang. He gave me these shits right here, bro. Swag. He gave me the 11s, gang. We swagged out. I'm about to run a muck in Hyrule. Oh shit. We swagged out. We about to get fly on these hoes. He gives you the Pegasus shoes now, gang. Those are the all red 11s. Now you can execute a devastating dash attack. Oh shit, where my light is off. Hold the A button for a short time. A helpful item is hidden in the cave on the east side of the lake. Well, that's in his voice. A helpful item is hidden in the cave on the east side of Lake Helia. Get it! Yo, oh man. Gotta stop telling me what to do, gang. Y'all use my 1 bomb. It better be something good in there. It better be more bombs in here. Okay, Yahtzee. And some coinage. Yo, I got bread, bro. I got like 407 of them things, bro. Hot run. He said 8. What's the A button? Oh, there we go. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm about to get dash-tastic. Oops, we off this. Oops, we off this. Get dash-tastic. Oops, we off this. Wait, where am I supposed to go? Where he tell me to go again? I forgot. I wasn't paying attention. Oh, they got bread. Kill those. Where the more octopuses at? Octopuses got the bread. They got red rupees. I like red rupees. Oh, he going over there. You go octopusy. Pull up. I'll holler at you for a second. Hey, let me holler at you. I got a little blue for you, boy. For you, boy. Alright, now where I'm supposed to go? Wow. Smush the shit out of you. Oh, I know I gotta go now. Hold on, watch this. Dun, 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 dun. Fucking awesome. I'll kick everybody's ass. Cause I got brand new boots. And I'm fucking cool. So fuck you. And fuck you too. My new, brand new, cool boots. Dun, 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 dun. So fuck you, and fuck you, and fuck you, and you too. Oh, fuck that ball. Oh, if I jump down there, I die. I can't swim just yet. Yo, my boy Ricky, what's good with you, homie? Welcome in. I appreciate the resub. You already know.
Bruh.
Yes.
Bruh.
Yes. It's the homie. You already know. Appreciate you, homie Ricky. I appreciate you, buddy. Welcome in. How was your week? How's your day? How's your year so far? How's everything? Talk to me. Tell me something good. Definitely appreciate the resub, homie. You already know. Man was on my heels while he was shooting. That was a 2-man. They tried to run a trizzy on me, gang. You been building all week. You know Angie. I'm tired, boss. No limit, Ange. Albert the Pariah. Who's that, a streamer? No limit, Ange. Oh, I could buy some hearts, but now I'm Gucci. If I die, you heard? Come on, don't try to kill me, fucking crow. I'm black with my shield. All you have to do is stand there. Just stand very still and you cannot kill me. If I stand very still, you cannot kill me. Or you can pick them shits up. You gotta get the gloves. Where that crab come from? You look like you might have an interesting destiny. No, I don't want to know. I'm not getting my bread to tell me some nonsense. I'm good on all of that. Oh, right. Right. Come on, you try to shoot me in the back? That's crazy. All that's crazy work. Oh, lucky the screen saved you. I was about to off with your head. Where am I supposed to be going? I know I gotta go. Where's my map? Where's my map? Where's my map? Where's my map? I need to go back over to the village. So I gotta go keep going up and over. Oh gosh. Oh gosh. Oh gosh. Full speed ahead. It's out. They want to cost the whole world. No, I don't want the suit say. I know what I'm looking for, or what I'm looking for, rather. No, that's not, bro. Hold on. There's bro over here, though. Bam, bam. They come out of there. And down here. There's like a couple things I have to do over here. Same old shit, Brody. Same old regular shit. What's good with you? How's your week so far? How's life treating you? Let me get some agua. I'm thirsty. Yeah, today's my Friday. I got the next 2 days off, so I'm chilling. I'm chilling. It's been a rough week for me too, though, bro. I ain't gonna hold you. This fucking week been kind of trash. I can't catch him? I'm faster than he is. I know I'm faster than him. Come on, gang. Oh, he boogied on me too. He hit the boogie on my ass. What a bookshop at? That's what I need to find, so I can knock the book off the shelf. I think it's down here, ain't it? Yeah. Factuals. I climb up here, bink, bink. And I go, bink. And grab that shit. Give me that. I remember that part. Now I don't know what to do after this, though. Wax! Welcome in. How are you? What's good with you, homie? What's up? Appreciate you for popping in, yo. What's good with you? How your week been? How did the stream go the other day? Oh, look, I freed his brother, yo. Homie had his little brother. He said he sealed his little brother in and just locked him in his room over here. I had to use fucking explosives to get him out. Like, what sealing did you do, sir? I'm about to call CPS on him, bro. Can't be locking little niggas in their rooms. I had to literally use an improvised explosive to get him out. Couldn't get him out of his room. I'm good, just done with the flu, so ooh, mostly lurking. How about you? Yeah, the flu. Oh, I hope you feel better, Waxy. That sounds kind of trash, to be honest with you. Hope you feel better. Take some NyQuil, some Theraflu. Get bundled up. Take care of yourself. I mean, if you can reach the goal within 15 seconds, we will give you something good. Ready, set, go. Oh, I wasn't ready. Wait, I wasn't ready. I fucking cheat that bit. I wasn't ready. Oh, you cheat that bit? She cheated. I'll get through this motherfucker. The sign is there. Bruh. I'll get through this. Sign is there. Bruh. Right, she's a cheating ass bit. Alright, do it again, bit. That's the way to get through there, past that sign. Yeah, you can't. Oh, you just jumped, duh. What an idiot. Alright, do it again. Alright, do it again. They tricked me with the 8-bit dimensions. Goddamn 8-bit fooled me again. Alright, so back through the house. Pardon me, y'all. Pardon me, gang. You need to keep walking through your room with my muddy shoes and shit. Alright, let's go. We up this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whoop, 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 whoop. 6, 7, 8. Whoop, 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 whoop. How long did that take? That was a record. Give me 3 hearts, nigga. Yeah, you don't want to fuck up because you could like walk past that and like jump off the cliff on accident and not get the heart. I've done that before. And easy past. So don't do that. But yeah, Wax, I'm just sitting here playing some Zelda. Obviously, this is an old school game from back, and this is one of the first games I played as a kid. So obviously, I don't remember all those years ago. It seems like a whole nother lifetime ago because I literally don't remember anything from this game. I beat it a handful of times. I figured I'd try something new. As far as this gaming thing goes, because Wild Hearts don't seem to be very popular, so I'm like, hey, let me try something different. Let me play some Zelda. It's not gonna be no Marvel Rivals or no shit like that, but I'll play some Zelda. This game is super chill. Are you liking it so far? Yeah, this game is official, man. Like this, like I said, it's a classic. I like the music from this in this game as well. That's a big vibe. Like even this little scene right here. Hold on, wait, girl. Come over here, get to my neck. Oh, I'm nice. Quarter. Keep it in the bottle. That's slavery, but you're enslaving fairies and shit. That's indentured servitude. We don't call it slavery. We call it indentured servitude. It's more palatable. You know what I'm saying? It's more palatable. Oh, bruh. Oh, we don't want to take a snapshot. All right, where do we got to go now? So we got the book. We got the boots. We got the book. We got the boots. We got a pendant. We need 2 more pendants. I think he marked the pendants on my map. I think that's what he said he did, right? Why do I keep pushing that button? It's triangle. Zoom up, zoom out. Yeah, so it's 1 up there and then 1 right there. Buddha gave me an intro into all this community stuff. Then I gotta come in, watch the stream, man, Virgo. Thank you so much. Freaky Fountain Music. Bruh, twerk, main reason I even watch Twitch like that. So many cool people. Oh, that's how you got put onto Twitch, is through twerk album. And Alba Hours his 500th follow on one of his first giveaway. That's kind of ill. Our spirits just low health. Yeah. Well, I'm in decent health and low spirits. I put Buddha on to twerk when I was on it. Yeah, I know. I saw that. I saw when you had Buddha do the interview stream with him. I watched her interview that she did. I saw that shit. I just didn't know. I was there for 50 interviews. 50? God damn. So you a twerk veteran, huh? You a twerk vet. You've been twerking these streets for. You're a twerkologist, huh? Twerkonomics. Alright, which way we go? That way? I gotta get up there. But I don't remember this game, bruh. Now it's older streaming, but normally I would only watch Buddha after her interview. Work gave me an intro to all these ones. Low spirits, what would cheer me up, bruh? If I knew I would have did that shit already, Waxy. It'd have been done already. It was that simple. If it was a pillar I could have popped, I'd have popped it. I'm trying this right here. I'm trying to see if this helps. Couple of these. I'm try 4 of these. I'll call you in the morning. I'm gonna take 3 of these and call you in the morning. You know what I'm saying? That's all I got. Maybe go take a nap or some shit. That's all I got. It's my copium. That's all I got, unfortunately. What you gonna do though? Know what I mean? It is what it is. C'est la vie, as they say, somewhere. Alright, so the Master Sword is up there. Can't get that, obviously. Gotta need those 2 pennies. Alright, let's make a run for the mountain. Let's see if we can actually get up there. I don't think I can though. I think you need something to get on the mountain. Like, I don't know. I done played so many fucking Zelda games. These just run together. Like, and low key, they all kind of the same. Like, like just the process of like same shit. All right, triangle is map. Triangle is the map. Triangle is the map. So over, up, over. All right. All right. I think I got it. All right. I think I got it. All right. Okay. All right. I think I got it. All right. I think I got it. Okay. Do you have a fave? A favorite what? Oh shit. Are you talking to me? In our favorite what, if you are? Zelda? Oh, a favorite Zelda. Probably Ocarina of Time. Another classic one. That was what, 64? I think me and B was just talking about that shit. That's probably my favorite Zelda. Ocarina. I have what you call it as well on this. I have what the shit is called? Not Tears of the Kingdom. The one before Tears of the Kingdom. What was that shit called? I have yet to beat it though. My daughter beat that shit in like a week, and I have yet to beat it. Like that's how you know I'm bad at games. It took literally 5 days to beat it. I still haven't beaten it. Breath of the Wild is what it's called. There you go. Bro, stop shooting me with your arrows, gang. Call a truce. I call a truce. I got an arrow, you got an arrow. Still need for us to be enemies. We brothers. We arrow brothers. Let's go over, up. Yeah, it's called Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is what it's called. I got that shit, but I haven't beaten that either. I got Hades on here too. I like Hades. Hades is fun. I haven't beaten that either yet though. I played Hades a bunch of times and haven't beat that shit. One of the homies was like, yeah, I picked up Hades. I played this shit the first time, like literally the very first time I ever played it, and I beat the whole game on my first run without dying. I never spoke to that nigga again. You're not gonna be that good and talk to me. I'm just not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. You could be that good on your own, sir. I'm not gonna be a part of my life and be that good at video games. And when you speak to him since, now I'm gonna play. That didn't happen. Could you imagine? What if I was that big of a hater? That's some hating shit. I need to stop chopping these bushes because these dudes are jumping off these bushes like it's they jab. They on patrol. It's triangle, sir. Triangle is okay. So that's the entrance. That's not the entrance to the fucking cave, bro. That's the damn castle, bro. Oh, that's crazy, man. Greatest. Nah, I want to play. I want to play. Nah, but that's a true story about homie saying that he picked this shit up and ran through it like first run, first try type shit. That part is true, but that's not true that I didn't speak to him again. I still talk to the homie. Of course I do. Come on, man. Y'all know your boy Burger's the homie. I don't do the homies like that, gang. When I'm gonna finish Wukong, bruh. Next stream Wukong. Next stream Wukong. Just because Ricky said so. Because Ricky said so. The good brother Fontaine said so. So next stream was Wukong stream. We're gonna get as far as we can in a couple hours of Wukong. And I'm not starting over either. I'm still starting from where I was at. I got a couple bosses down. I got some clips from Wukong too, gang. Like I don't remember doing it, but apparently when I beat, like as I was playing this shit, I beat the bosses. I like saved all my victories. So I could clip that shit up on CapCut and make some shit out of it. Oh, those fights are good fights. Low key, high key, low key, high key. Come on, B. I could have caught that B and used him for something. Look at these assholes. Maybe it's nothing, but this tree feels kind of strange as we cut it. Yo, Virgo, a mysterious fog has recently fallen over the forest. We have to be careful. What's telling me about fog and shit, gang? Oh yeah, he's invincible. He don't care nothing about nothing. What's this? The House of Lumberjacks. A Bumpkin and B Bumpkin. Hey, A Blumpkin. Hey, the Blumpkin brothers. Look at the Blumpkin bros. How your last name Blumpkin? All right, Waxy, appreciate you stopping in. Appreciate the alert. You already know. Yeah, I finished it. I'm on New Game Plus. Nah, bro, I need you to be godfather to my children. Fix that R&B, that first run you did on Hades, fucking kids. Oh, never mind. I retract. I saw you playing still. Didn't realize I remember. Oh, Ricky, yeah. My Ricky. Look, Waxy gonna look. He looks. Okay, be safe. Yeah, Waxy, be safe. Fair travels. Waxy. Hope you accomplish your mission in record timing. Fucking S rank that shit. Fucking flat that shit. Flat the shit out that mission. Flat the fuck out that mission, gang. Fucking Snake Plissken that mission, gang. Fucking B.A. Baracus that mission, gang. Fucking go full BA. Oh look, another heart I can't get. I think I saw that one already. Yo, bro, how do I get on the mountain? Wait. They gotta had left this shit alone, right? And I could run into that shit and it like turns to stairs or some stupid shit like that, right? Bruh, I cannot get the. Yo, this game is gonna piss me off because it's not that complicated. I just really do not remember this shit. Now I talked to Stashy. Stashy told me. You already know. Type shit. I'm happy for the boy. Happy for the boy. Oh, you can kill them shits with signs? Okay. Come on, bro. What's your bird asses? So as soon as they get a taste, they want more. Look. Until you whack their asses. Then they leave you alone. Just like a fucking bird. Just like a bird. Yo, bro, where do you go in this game, doggy? I'm back at the cemetery. This ain't it. I do not know where to go. That ain't it. That's just gonna take you over there. I remember that. Right, talk to shorty right here. Hey, appreciate you. Tell him to relax. Give me a half a heart. Y'all gonna stop with this half a heart shit. Alright, come on, back into the light. When you doing the next cooking with Virgo? I'm typing with my pinky. I don't know, bro. That was a one-off. I might not never do that shit again. Nah, I'm gonna do another one. I'm gonna do I don't know, but I'm gonna make some I know I'm gonna make some steak though, cause I want some steak. I'm craving for some steak. Shit, I might go give me some steak. Nah, not this week. If I do, I ain't gonna stream that shit. But yeah, I'm gonna do another one. I'm gonna do a steak straight. Show y'all how to make a good old hood steak. Know what I mean, real fast too. It's quick, fast, in a hurry. Quick, fast, in a hurry, and that shit bang. Same recipe all the time. Pop, pop, beep, bop, meek, mock. And that shit come out bang. Fuck that shit right on the pop, pop, beep. Yo, it's not this way, bro. Yo, you can't fast travel in this shit. I'm gonna get a horse. I'll call my horse. I don't need a horse. I got boots. All right. I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna try to come down here. I ain't come down here yet. Let me go down there. Let me go down. Let me go down, baby. Let me go down, baby. Down the roller coaster. Man, I did come down. Well, that's the thing. Oh, I gotta go over the down. My bad. It's over. One more. Then down here, right? Yeah. C. Don't hug the rock. Just run through all that real fast, right? Just run through all that. Wait, nope, it's not that way. It's this way, ain't it? Wait, no. Don't you gotta like catch this fucking rabbit or some shit like that? Is that not this game? Oh, I guess not. I just murdered his ass. Thought you had to catch him, but I just fucking murdered his ass. My bad, Mr. Rabbit. Alright, so smooth brain. Up, and out, right? But then you can't. I want what's in the box. What's in the box? What's in the box? Alright. Then we'll come back. How about what's in the box? Alright, then we push in, out, and we out. I bet. Pull one of these motherfuckers. If I'd have pulled the other one, what would have happened? Should I pull it and see? Because I'm curious as fuck. That's all I did? What'd that do? Let the water go? Oh shit. Oh shit. Come on, bro. Your mom, bro. Fucking mom, bro. Fucking mom. Your fucking mom, bro. Oh, this the old dude? Come on, gang. Don't pay attention to the average old man. Leave him alone. Why would I do that? Don't pay attention to the average old man. That's wild suspect. Okay. Come on, bro. Put this half a life shit, bro. It's the third time. The journey continues. I gotta find the old man in 2 chains. I gotta find the Dipset chain, the G Unit chain, and the old man. Oh no. I'm not caught by a fucking sand ghost. Fucking sand ghost. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Which way we going? Up? Yeah, we going up. Fucking sand ghost. Oh no. Oh no. Fucking vultures. Beat it, vultures. Wait. Open the way to the... Go forward, make your wish here, and it will be granted. Alright, open that shit. He's like, take off my hat. Dear gods of Hyrule, it is I, your humble servant Link. Now you gotta talk in this regular accent. Dear gods of Hyrule, it is I, your humble servant Link. I would like for you to give me the 2 chains. Like 2 chains. 1 Dipset, 1 G Unit. I need to find the old man, please. If you can help me, please. I would really appreciate it. Fucking God shine down on him. Happy day. Happy day is here. The gods have shined down upon me. Now I may continue my journey. Oh, happy day. Thank you, White Jesus. Thank you so much, White Jesus. I appreciate you so much. With your abs. Ever walking abs. How did you get those abs? The Metro Jerusalem. The barely total fitness in Jerusalem. Alright, we off this. Whoop. Whoop. Yo, throw that, bro. I'm gonna hit you right in the eye. Bink. Bink. I wonder if I like these or I get something special. Let's see. The stone that the builder refused. Gonna run this way. Bro, Link Nigerian, bro. Link Nigerian and Zelda from Uganda, bro. Straight Congo flow, bro. From motherland shit around here. We all thought Hyrule. We all thought this was really from, bro. We all thought the story of Link and Zelda and Hyrule really came from, bro. This is an African folktale, bro. You ain't know that? I might have just made that up. I might have. You can't be sure. Who knows? That shit might be true. I might have just made it up. Who knows? He tried to shoot me with laser. That's the only thing we can be sure of. That he just tried to shoot me with a laser. That's the only thing we know for a fact. Everything else, up to speculation. I just whapped him in. He's still. Oh, I got hit by a fucking. Oh. Oh, bumped into a cactus. Oh. Let me explore. What's over here? I came out the left mouth. I need to go in the right mouth. I need to get to the right mouth now. Maybe what I need is in the right mouth. Hold on, watch this. This is some hot shit. Hold on, watch this. Yeah, see, you fuck. I remember that. I remember that. That's my brain is not so broken. My brain is not so broken. It works sometimes too. Oh no, if you walk into that, you get hit though. Come on, bro. Little sand dudes. Come on, sand dudes. Yo, bro, I hate sand dudes, bro. Oh. Yo, they fucking me up too, gang. I ain't get nothing yet. I didn't get the compass. I ain't get the Dora map. Oh, he's sucking me. He's sucking me. Tried to suck me off, bro. Oh, I'll take that heart though. Yeah. Fucking suck. Try to suck me off. Did I go this way? Yo, bro, my sense of direction is trash, gang. I can't be doing this type shit. Did I go over here yet? Oh shit, all this is new. Eek. This board can't be that big, right? Cause like this game literally fits on your watch, right? You can fit this game on like a watch. So levels can't be that big, right? Bruh. Oh yeah, I need that heart. Taste my fury. Oh yeah, I killed the shit out of all y'all, gang. Have a heart flow, what it is. Oh, I ain't get the key yet. Your mother. Oh. Oh, big blue coins. What'd it pop out? Bing, bing, bing. You gonna shoot me in the back. Fuck. That's some good aim he got. I ain't gonna hold you. Oh, run. Sniper fire! Sniper fire! Take cover! Yeah! 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 Bro, I said don't pause. We just double down around this part. No one paused was said after that statement. What I said? I said some Ayo. Oh wait, don't try to trick me. Did I just go out there already? I think they sauced me, gang. I ain't say no Ayo. X to what?
I ain't even hear this whole time my mic was down.
Oh, I feel like that was the wrong thing to do just now. Put my ring on the wrong finger because I rang the wrong woman. God damn, why I do that? I don't think that was right, gang. That might have been a mistake. Mistakes might have been made. Yeah, mistakes was made. Mistakes were made. Lessons were learned. And we're going to move forward. That's all you can do in life sometimes, you know? You live and learn. You pray to the gods that it don't happen again. Oh ye gods of Hyrule, please, please, do not let me do that stupid shit again. I beg you, show me the correct way to go. I get lost very easily. Guide me on my journey. I would appreciate you. Let's try this shit again. Let's try this shit again, you bitch. Get out of my way, you fucking bird. I ain't dead yet. Alright, try this again. One more time. Okay, that ain't the right way to go. Okay, this is where we went before, right? When we came out the bad mouth, we gotta get in that door right there. We need keys, gang. We need keys. We getting keys from yo. Fucking stupid fuck. No. Don't let him fucking get shots off. When he starts shooting, you know what I mean? He's a shooter. As soon as he starts shooting, you don't know how to act. As soon as he pull a heat. Nah, see, that's how he went before. That's how we got locked out. Nah, don't go that way. Alright, so it's not that way, right? That's the key we need. We came from that way last time, right? So we'll go back up this way. The denial is crazy. I'm completely baffled by it. The blatant disregard. Listen, I don't know what you're talking about. You don't say. Alva. You don't say. I know nothing. I do nothing. You do something. I do nothing. You do something. I do nothing, papi. You do something. Maybe that was you. What did you? It wasn't me, papi. Me no yo. Virgo, it is I, Shahara. You must never fail to find all the treasures in each dungeon. Yeah, no shit. That's what I be talking about. Like, yo, don't read their text, man. Oh, peep game. Look, the fucking key. Stop following me, fucking evil eye. Run. Dip. Run. 2 shots. 2 shots this time. Bam, bam. Dip doing that ass. Yo, I need some hearts, yo. So we gotta go right into this door over here. Cause I have a key. Look who's got a key. Yeah, fuck you. You gotta take the key. Oh, yo, bruh, take cover, gang. You can't see me if I hide behind shit. Give me that. Huh. 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 Fuck you, eyeball. Huh? Give me that. Got the big ugly key. You got the big ugly key. This is the master key of the dungeon. It can open many locks that small keys cannot, because it is ugly as fuck. Is it down there? No. Alright, so we got the big key. Now we gotta find the big chest. And the big lock. Right? And we Gucci. And then the big boss. And then we kick his ass bigly. Oh, he shot me in the asshole. Like an asshole. My man puckered up. You know, he said, shot it right in his cake. Boss him. Bow. Give me that. Bow. I'm getting all these arrows, gang. Oh, I missed you, fuck.
Bro, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to call it.
Nah, do your thing, bro. You already know. I appreciate you. Chillin' with your bite. Alright, bro. Get your rest. Catch you tomorrow. Alright, so we're gonna try this way. Where is the big... It's not over here. I just came this way. Far left. Ah! Pooty. Oh, I got the power glove that quick? We got the bling, baby. Let's fucking go. Let's go. I got the power glove. Now I can fucking fap with full force. Full force fat, baby. Fucking. Double fist that fucking. Let me get my bow and arrows. Where's the boss of this level? Then Screeps! Yo, stop shooting at me, gang. That shit rude as hell. I'm gonna take all this. Give me this. Give me this. Give me this. I hit this again. Oh! Don't bump into him. Come on. Nah, come on. Come on. You can't go out like that. Come on. Alright, so I got the gloves. You don't have to equip the gloves. This is some automatic shit right here. Yeah, I don't do shit, right? If you like these, I did that already, right? That's how I got that, I think, wasn't it? Some shit like that. Alright, so I got the gloves. What do I do with the gloves now? That's how I pick up shit and toss shit. But there's a boss here I need to get to. Bruh. I want to remember this game. No. No, I don't want to die. Yo, take it easy, bro. You already know I appreciate y'all coming through. Spend a little bit of time that you can with your boy. Do what you gotta do. Appreciate the resub as well, you already know. Scuff gang shit. Alright, so that's not right. I went over there and got the other joint. Oh no! Stop me with the sand powers. Fucking earth style. God damn, I need a fire shield so I can block them fireballs like a boss. That is not the way you want to go. Right? Not correct. This is the way I already went, right? Damn it. Oh. I got the glove. Got that. I don't know why the fuck I came back through here. Take your time, go slow. Oh, or not. Black card, Ricky paying rent through subs. Shit, y'all know Twitch cuts ain't like that. And I don't get that many of them. I wonder how like the big streamers actually make their money. Like, where do they like most of their money come from? Does it come from like ad revenue or does it come from subs? I wonder, like a Castanet, like what is his biggest revenue coming from? Is it from actual streaming and getting subs, or is it from the ads that run during his streams? Heard when you hit partner, you get more from ads, and yeah, you get a better split. It's like 50-50, 60-40 or some shit like that. Partner's hard though, bro. You gotta average 75 viewers. I can't even get 75 motherfuckers to watch my video. Picture me having 75 people in here just watching me stream. That's crazy. That's a lot of people. Oh, come on, dope. Come on, dope. Come on, dope. Come on, dope. Yo, bro, I do not know where to go or what to do. Nope, that ain't it. This is gonna take me to the long tongue. Right? Not anyway I want to be. I missed something. I'm missing something, gang. That's that. Dip that. Fuck are you, eyeball? These are the fairy ladies. Hey, fairy ladies. I don't need them, no. Got my little one heart. I can still die and start from the beginning of this shit. It don't make a difference. I'll let them have their freedom. So those dudes are literally there, so you can't run through here. They literally stop you in your tracks. All right, you fucker. I don't know what to do. Here's that. You know what happens when you do that? I know that's not it for this dungeon. It has to be a freaking boss in this bitch, right? That don't help. I did that already. See, look, it's right there on the second floor. I gotta go up. Wait. I'm horrible at reading maps. Alright, so I gotta go. I'll see if that shit. Where am I now? That's the big chest room. So where have I not been? Like, how do you decipher that from the maps? And I heard it partner plus streams is like Kyle gets sponsored here post up area for shit. Just feels like it'd be streaming for A and B Jesus. Streaming A and B Jesus, yeah. Shit, you talking about you get more. I feel like you get more interaction than I do, bro. Like I watch your streams, but you already know I be in there talking to you and shit. I feel like you get more random motherfuckers coming through saying what's up to you and giving you follows and shit. Have you ever been in my stream and seen somebody come in and just hit the follow button? Bruh. It's not a thing, bro. I've seen it happen to you quite a few times. People just come through like, hey, what's up, man? They get you a little follow, you know what I mean? I've seen it happen a few times. It's not a thing. I'm not the follow type, I don't think. To know me is to love me. If you don't know me, you ain't fucking with me. I'm one of them type of personalities, I think. So up, and that ain't do it though. I went out that way. That's the chest. That's the out mouth. That's that out mouth. Right? Bruh, make it make sensuals. It's not making no sensuals to you, but I know I gotta go up though. Nothing in here. Check the map. Check the map. Alright. Down. Over up or over up. Alright. Right? This way, yeah. Correct. Keep going. Now it's this room. Yeah, I know that. Then up. Ain't shit in here but this motherfucker and these motherfuckers. Opportunity for death. That's all that's in here. Yeah, see? That's it. Unless I'm missing something. Check my mizat. Yeah, see? And you come down into the right. My right, your left. Oh, I don't need that. See you later. Okay, so I'm here with it. And I'll go out and up. Yo, this might be it for this fucking. No, it's not, bro. You can go to a whole nother fucking floor in this shit. Just look. I just look right at it. So probably like shit, trust. I feel like shit. Nah, you good, man. Most of them be from the community thing. You take the effort to edit your videos and such. I'm sure with more eyes on, you'll be good. I rarely get viewers, followers, like, you know, organically someone popping in. I love you, Alva. I'm following you. I'm gonna follow you. Yeah, I don't get it either, bro. But at least you got the community. The only community I got. I love my community, dude. I fucks with y'all. Like you, the homie B, fucking Ricky Stash. I fucks with y'all. Fucking sis, big Buddha. I fuck with y'all. So I'd rather my 10 lions than 100 sheep to keep it a band with you. I always say that, but I really mean that shit. So if it take me 10 years to get another 10 niggas like y'all, that's worth it. I mean, I don't want a bunch of motherfuckers gonna come in. I'm gonna have you as a follower 1 week. The next week you wanna follow me. I don't want that anyway. So I really don't mind. It is what it is. Everything ain't for everybody. You know what I mean? Oh no, don't kill me, motherfucker eating pizza. How the fuck I get over there? Run, save yourself. No. He's knowing physics. I'm shooting through walls. I'm savage. Savage. It's a fuck time space. I'm the mole man. He shoots fireballs. Fuck your time space. Yo, bro, I'm gonna give this one more walkthrough. And then this shit could eat my ass. AKA, I'm a cheat. Cause I really can't figure this shit out. Like, I ran through a room, dog. I got the map. I got the compass. I got the big key. I got the glove. I just gotta find the boss, so I can whip his ass and get my G-Unit chain. He got my G-Unit chain. He slapped the homie the other day in the back seat, whap, and took the G-Unit chain off his neck. We gotta get that back. We can't go out like that. So I went and grabbed the sword, you know what I mean? And the shield, you know what I mean? I'm trying to see what's good. And they free fronting right now, like, they ain't trying to pull up. I'm knocking on all the doors in the hood. They ain't trying to come outside. It's real other shit right now. You don't go that way. Bruh. Bruh. It's not up there, it's not down there, it's not around here. It's gonna be some old stupid shit. I'm gonna have an attitude. Oh, I know what it is. I know what it is. I just fucking remembered. I think. No, I didn't, because that's not it right. I don't see it right there. I did. Yeah, you gotta fucking do this. Fucking asshole. You couldn't pick them shits up before because you ain't have the gloves. Fucking dick. A little dickish, but I mean, it is what it is. And this shit, you literally have to wait till all the tiles get thrown away. You gotta go sweet modes on all these shits before it opens up, right? Or is that the next one? That's the next one, because they gave you the key on this one. Come on, you fucking... throwing mad floor at me. Stop throwing floor at me, boy! Oh my god. Oh my god, the disrespect. Oh my god. How much floor? Every tile? All the tiles? How many? I'm curious. Oh, they made a whole skull figure. Very ominous, guys. Good job. I'm totally scared. I'm fucking shaking in my boots. Fucking shaking in my boots, guys. Fucking skull on the original, guys. Good job. Fucking skull. Good job. Fucking 8-bit skull. Really scary. Fuck you and your 8-bit skull. You don't scare me. Don't shoot me. Punch. Yeah. Yo, I need some hearts, gang. Don't shoot me. You neither. You fucking shot me. Yeah, nah, I definitely wouldn't want uptight viewers. I gotta tuck my so I don't hurt someone. Yeah, you know how that shit goes. And they're gonna end up unfollowing your ass anyway. Potentially even trying to get you in trouble, trying to get your ass banned or something like that. Because you're problematic. You can't be problematic. People don't usually use that word no more, right? I remember that word about problematic. He's problematic. Dion. The master of the towel dodge. Oh my god, Kobe. Oh my god. Mayweather. Oh my god, Roy Jones. Oh my god, Squeaks. Oh my god, the Squeak God. Oh my god, Squeak King. Oh my god, Squeak Daddy. Oh my god, the Squeak Prince. Oh my god, it's a Lord of Squeeps. Oh my god, Squeak Daddy-o. Oh my god. Oh wait, yo, he don't take pot work. Yeah, he don't like that pot work. He don't like pot. Oh, you gotta hit these shits and then the wall gonna stretch out on some bozo shit, right? Watch this. Oh yeah, see? I remember that. Woohoo! Stretch your fucking balls, you heard? I pull up, I stretch your fucking walls. I light these 4 candles, then I stretch your walls. What do you know about that? I come to Wakanda style. I light up my candles, and then I stretch your walls. Give you my big key. Oh shit. Oh shit. Fucking sandworm. Fucking sandworms, gang. No, don't kill me. First shot. Come on, guys. First shot. We can do this. First shot. First shot. Come on. Fucking die. Come on. Give me it. Come on, somebody fucking die. Nope. Not feeling good, fellas. Oh! These are my mega powers. Spin the Rudy. Oh, frame freeze. Spin the Rudy. They fucking invincible, bro. Spin the Rudy. I'ma die, gang. Come on, you bitch. Yo, why they don't die? These some tough ass sandworms. All that time just to kill one, bruh? 2? 1 HP in the dream. Can we do it again? Can we do it again? Oh, my son! Mr. 1 HP! Let's fucking go! Chrome the Clutch Master! Give my fucking G unit chain! G unit! G unit! Yo, my son Link is the GOAT of 1 HP. Let's fucking go. Heroics. He get 1 HP, his attack goes up. Word. I'm start running heroics build, sword and shield heroics build. I had to survive. Survive. Goddamn sand ghost. Goddamn sand ghost. Oh, look. What's that? That's how I get some shit. I get some shit from over here. I'll take 1 heart. I'll take that. Alright, so we got pendant number 2. I can pick these shits up, kill now? Yeah. What up, old nigga? Pay no attention to the average. Yo, he never speaks to you, does he? Is that the village dude? It's not the village dude, right? No way, right? Oh, I picked a big dude. I'm the man, bro. Look how diesel I am. Look how skrunk I miss. Fucking skrunk, boy. Look how skrunk I miss. Oh, shit. I found Epstein basement. Oh. Check out the cave east of Lake Hylia. Strange and wonderful things live in it. Found me some jewels. Oh, that was wonderful, gang. I got 631 rupees, boy. I'm about to have 999 rupees. Can you even have 1,000 rupees? Oh shit, my charger broke. No wonder my headphones not charging up. Look at this shit. Fucked up. I got the worst luck with headphones, gang. My shit's always breaking. Ooh, ooh, don't kill me. Don't kill me, dude. These are the ones you can't pick up. You can pick up the you need the gold glove to pick them shit. Once I did that, I gotta go get this fucking this one. But how do I get up there? That's what I'm saying. You can't just go up there. You gotta get up there some kind of special way. I got gloves now. Let me just go back over there and see what I can fucking pick up. I gotta feel like I got something. Yeah, watch me bench press this shit so high, super strong. Huh. Beat everybody up. Beat up everybody. So up, over, up, over, up, up, over, right? Over, up, up, over. Over, 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 up, up, over. Over. Maybe up. Yeah, up. Up, up, over. Over, over, up. One more up. Yeah, one more up. Over, over, up, 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 up. Yes, yes, yes. Up, up. Now over. Yeah. Yeah. Let me go check this lady. She got my dope. Got my dope, lady. She's cooking up some PCP for you, boy. Let me go see if she got that. I'm about to sell mad fentanyl Hyrule. This thing is strung out. Appreciate you, gang. Appreciate you. I wanted to try to get this Master Sword before I ended the stream. But yeah, if this shit keep taking so, you know what I mean? It's gonna be a fucking rap for that fucking. I'll get past here. Let's go. What? Oh, fuck that rock. Super strong. Go this way. I gotta blow those shits up. You can't right? You gotta bomb those, right? Let me see. Oh no, that's not my bombs. Oh, why I keep taking pictures like what's up with you, gang? Oh, that's not how you do that. How do you do that then? If I jump down there, I'm gonna be fucking stuck, huh? Who cares? YOLO. I guess not. Oh, fucking shocked by the shock octopus. Fucking green dildos. Green electric dildos. Available in wall bombs. Oh shit, Zora time? Are we Zoring it up already? Oh, don't jump off the thing and die. You can't swim, gang. Oh, don't do it again, gang. You can't swim. Come on, I don't want to kill none of the homies now. Y'all gotta get out the way now. Zora time? I didn't know Zora time this quick. Oh. Oh. I think I went the wrong way, but oh. You sure I went the wrong way. Oh. Oh, chill, y'all. Go this way. Oh. Chill. Stay in the shallows. Oh. Oh, wrong way. Oh. Chill. I got it. Chill, Zoras. Oh, oh, wrong way again. Oh, chill. Oh. Oh, chill. Yeah, you gonna push me off? That's crazy. Oh, sweeps. Oh. Oh, we made it. The fuck? He's gonna like ask me for something, ain't he? Ha ha ha. What do you want, little man? Do you have something to ask me? Yeah, I want the flippers, gang. Ha ha ha. But I just don't give away free flippers, you silly bitch. I sell them for 500 rupees. Up there. I got 500 for you. Wahaha! One pair of flippers coming up. I will give you a free bonus with your first purchase. I will let you use the magic waterways of the sea folk, which link lakes and rivers. When you see a whirlpool, dive into it. You never know where you'll surface. Wahaha! You brought Zora's flippers. With these, you should be able to swim even in deep waters. Let's test them out. Sploink! He's correct, sir. I can swim. Oh, look, I'm one of y'all. Don't shoot me, dog. I'm one of y'all. Look, we both like fish sticks now. I like fish sticks. Don't shoot me. Don't shoot me, dude. For real, I ain't playing. Don't shoot me, dude. Is it down? It's down now. Where am I going? Come on, bro. I come in peace. How do I get that? I want that heart. How do I get that heart? I want that heart. Where's the heart? Why the fuck I keep doing that? All right, so I got the flippers down. Now can I get up the mountain? Is that what that was? I got flippers and gloves, bro. I'm blinged out right now. Yeah, fuck that. I'll take the shortcut. Got flippers and gloves, and I don't give a fuck about life. I could swim and beat niggas up at the same time. That's a portal. Let me try that portal out. I can't go in it. Oh, there you go. Lit. What you know about my portal game, gang? Oh, I'll put a bomb. It's a bomb. Let me try one more. Soy. That's why I get the hammer. I gotta hit those with the hammer. There's probably some secret shit over here too. Walk them shits down. Beak, beak. Come on, I'll beat you to death with bushes, bro. I don't want none of your brain. Get beat to death with a bush. You don't want none of your brain. Now this fucking right here, this capsule right here in the Dark World is official. This is when you get that harpoon shit from. I remember that. Oh no. Aha! Big brain. Ah. They fucking arrow proof for some stupid shit. Oh, I guess not. If they die, do I get in there? I don't think so. Fuck. Shit. Mulligan. Fuck. Shit. Fuck. Shit. Mulligan. Fuck. Gotcha. Golly, bruh. Fourth, you fucking bandit, you fuck. Give me all this shit. Pussy ass bitch. Pussy ass bitch. Take some rupees, but don't tell anyone I gave them to you. Keep it between us. I'm telling everybody. Oh, you gave me another 300? Oh, I'm caked up from the face up. Yo, I got 497. I just spent 500 on slippers. He just gave me 3 back. That was cake. Oh yeah, give me that. Yo, Zoro, what's good, gang? Nah, don't do that, you heard? Don't do that. Alright. Oh, you got split into a million baby pieces. I got something coming up over here. Just don't do that. Man. Die. Ah. Okay. All right. Obviously, it's gonna be some fairy action in here. Got a fairy in a bottle. Wait, what now? They're trying to trap me in here, bro. Oh, that's violation. Hook you up and you still letting everyone know? Hey, I'm telling everybody, bro. Oh, nobody else in Hyrule keeping it P. When in Rome, you know what I mean? When in Rome, we do like the Romans. As soon as I walked up to shorty, she ready to call the police on me. I'm telling everything I know too. You can earn a lot of rupees by defeating enemies. It's the secret of my success. See? They tell everything they know. I ain't asked them nothing about none of that. You asked him about defeating enemies. How he earned his coin. I asked him how he earned his coin. You won't do me a favor. You can tell me how to get this master sword. Pikachu! Also, welcome back, Waxy. I appreciate you. How was your trip? Hope your mission was successful. Hope you crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. Oh, get in the hole! Get in the hole! Ew. Oh, don't double hole. Don't double hole. Alright, we out. Alright, swim clear of the hole. Swim clear of the hole. Fucking suck you back in. Swim clear of the hole. Yo, I'm about to die, gang. Alright, so we got that one pin that we got. Oh, let's try to move some rocks. I feel like we're close where we need to be. Yeah. Come on, birds. Yeah, beat it. Oh! It was a crab. Alright, so I definitely could have moved that before, right? Is that the entrance to the mountain? Bats! Rats with wings! Oh, more! I fucking die if I fall in there, huh? Elway, you're too expensive for my blood. He hooked you up, man. Thank you. It was picked up some meds and said, "Oh, how you gonna get? You supposed to go get some meds. You're supposed to get some Ritz crackers. I know damn cinnamon rolls. Waxy, where does cinnamon rolls fit into the equation? Supposed to get some Sudafed, maybe some, like I said, some Ritz crackers, maybe some saltines, maybe a little bit of chicken noodle soup with a soda on the side, ginger ale preferably. There's no black folks think ginger ale is fucking medicine. That shit ain't medicine. Come on, bee. Can't even kill a bee. Oh, yes, you can. Bees endangered species, bro. Don't be killing the bees, bro. Save the bees, bro. Fuck is up with you, gang? Oh, I got killing my half heart. Give me a heart. Yes. 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 The house of the Abe Blumpkin and B Blumpkin. Yo, where do I gotta go, gang? I feel like the church. Go to the church. Where's the church? Down and to the left. Bro, I'm getting whooped up, bro. I'm accomplishing the goal slowly. My boy Link here, cause he didn't come all the way from Nigeria to fail. Also, Link is Nigerian. Oh, and Zelda's from Uganda. Because the story of Link and Zelda is really originally was an African folktale. Passed down generation to generation until no, I was like, that might be true. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to run amok and lead you astray. I apologize if you feel either hoodwinked or bamboozled. I apologize. Yo, this is a fucking, what you call it, ain't it? Ain't this the secret to the shit? This fucking, yeah, it is, but you need both the new gloves. I need the new gloves. I need the golden gloves. I only got the silver gloves. I don't got enough fat power. Need more fat power. Fucking killed me! Oh, I died, bro. Oh, I forgot I had a fairy gang to bring me back to life. That's why I keep a fairy in my pocket. In case of emergencies. Oh! I forgot I could swim. Okay, so I just came through here. I went through this portal. That wasn't it, bruh. I don't know how to get to the mountain, bruh. I can't get the fog to lift in the forest until I get the master sword. I can't get the master sword until I get that third pendant. The third pendant is on the mountain. How do I get on the mountain? Oh, crazy flying fairy lady. It's definitely both. It's definitely both. Bro, I don't know what to do, bro. Max, you never played this, huh? Do you have any Zelda knowledge for me? Bro, I really don't know what to do, bro. Like, down, up, down. Like, what are you doing there? Left, right. Oh shit, taking pictures. Smile, you're on candid camera. Fucking police abusing their authority. I caught you on TV. Where's your body cam, officer? Where's your body cam, soldier? Stop abusing the fucking general public. Link did nothing to you. Okay, bruh. I don't know where to go. Uh-oh, confession time. I've never played a single Zelda game in my life. Not a one. Not for Nintendo 64. Not for Switch. Not for Nintendo. Not one. Not one. So what's your preferred genre of gaming, Waxy? What type of games do you prefer? Shooters, RPGs, scary ass thriller games, horror games. What are you into? Fighting games? You don't strike me as the Tekken type. You don't strike me as the Mambo Combo type. Those guys are usually way more aggressive and douchey. Oh, bees! Fucking hate bees, bro. Dog, I'm so confused. Not a one. I'm a horror gamer. You? I don't know. I'm kind of, to be honest, I'm just starting to get back into gaming, so I haven't found what I'm good at. So whatever I feel like I'm good at is what I'm gonna end up liking. But I don't know. I play mostly games like the Black Myth Wukong or the Elder Ring. Those little one-player, little go-through games. I like Monster Hunter. A little bit of Wild Hearts. I like Wild Hearts. I don't know. I like a little bit of everything, I think. But I can't say that, though. I don't like shooters. I'm not a shooter. And I don't like racing games, either. The only racing game I would play is, like, maybe some Mario Kart. Maybe some old school Connecticut. I'll play that shit. I like Connecticut. I don't know. Like Resident Evil. I wanted to try some of the Resident Evil games. I have, like, all of them, literally. But they so fucking scary, bro. I don't like them. Just that scary shit. I smoke too much weed for that shit. That shit make me paranoid. You paranoid? Piss on myself. I ain't always trying to sell you some shit. Yo, Habibi, stop trying to sell me shit. Fuck is up with you? But for a little minute, I did play a lot of fighting games. I was into fighting games for a little minute. I was into Tekken for a little while. I ain't gonna hold you. I was a Tekkener. Tekken, like Tekken, like 3, Tekken Tag, back in the day, PS2 days. Yeah. But I want to start getting some more community games, bro. Like I want like the squad up and play some fucking community games, bro. Everybody on voice chat and play some community games, bro. Play some fucking Lethal Company. That's what that shit's called, right? Lethal Company. Is it Lethal Company? That's joint that's kind of like Among Us, but like more like realistic a little bit. Oh, I found the secret hole in the ground. Oh shit. Oh shit. I'll take that. Link is very satisfied by that. With that turn of events. I am very happy. Got extra heart. Bless your heart. That's what it's called, right? Lethal Company? I think that's what it's called. Bro, I don't know where to go, bro. That's the sword I can't get yet. I need this pendant, gang. I think the boys play that one in Elden. You should join us sometime. Y'all be on when y'all stream. Not you ain't talking about Ricky late ass streams, but he be streaming at freaking 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. That's just like 3, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning for me. I would have to go to sleep and then wake up early to do that. Yeah. Well, actually, boy, I'm 42 years old. Actually, I can't be staying up all late like that no more. My body not set up for, you know what I mean? I still have residual side effects and shit. I can't do it. Boy, it needs some rest. My lighter, but I'm gonna smoke this blunt. I know that much. At 10 p.m. But when you stream, I feel like I catch more of your streams than I feel like I catch Ricky streams. I don't know why. And you up top though, so how different is your time zone from down here? Where you at? You live in Quebec? We live in Montreal. That's how they say it too. Montreal. En français. En français, s'il vous plaît. You up north. That's Buffalo up north. That was my French accent, by the way. FYI. My French accent. I got it from Target. It was on sale. It's 7:50 right now. I'm on the West Coast. Starting by 4 p.m. Where are you? I'm in New York. New York. I'm freaking New York, dude. Freaking NY. Oh, wait. I need her. I need that. But not like the cool part of New York. I'm like upstate New York. Not like the cool part. Not like where it's cool at. But where it used to be cool at. It's not so cool no more. It's low-key trash bags. Yo, bro, everything everywhere is trash. Have a little serious moment for a second. I'll be gigging a lot. I'll be trying to keep things super lighthearted. But yo, bro, I had to take a road trip today. Like a transport, I guess, to drop somebody off, drop a kid off at my job. out to like, it was like 2 hours away from where I live. Obviously, driving the road, I had to stop and use the bathroom and get gas. So I stopped at the gas station. But I've never in my life seen a gas station that didn't have public bathrooms. Like, as soon as you pull up to the gas station, they got a big ass sign. It's like, yeah, no public restrooms. So I'm like, all right, that's weird. That's awkward. A gas station right off of the highway. Pseudo sorta, whatever. But close enough, you know what I'm saying? Not offering public restrooms. Like, y'all get travelers. Like, hey, but anyway, so I'm like, all right, whatever. So I'll leave out of there. I go to the spot next door. Same shit. No public restroom. I'm like, all right. Kind of crazy. Kind of getting annoyed because I gotta go to the bathroom, obviously. You know what I mean? Next spot next door. Same shit. Next spot next door. Same next spot. Yo, four or five spots in a row. Like the fifth or sixth spot, which was a gym. They finally let me use the fucking bathroom. And like, yo, I was so fucking annoyed, bro. Like, but that shit like that, like, you come across areas like that, FYI, when you come across areas like that, that's very indicative of the area itself as a whole. It usually means that area suffers from like some kind of fucking drug epidemic or some kind of drug pandemic. And that's the reason that there's no public bathroom access, because they don't want fucking people going in the bathrooms getting high. So like, certain parts of New York City is like that. Like I said, I'm upstate a little bit, New York. So I wasn't really expecting that. And then the area where I was at, like, you look around at face value, like, you're not from out there, you don't really know. So I'm like, well, why? Like, you know what I mean? As I'm looking, I start looking. As I'm noticing the signs, I start looking with my other eye. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, okay. Everybody's fucking strung out this motherfucker. Okay, I get it. Bro, this country, boy, like, this shit's everywhere, gang. This shit's spreading. Like, people want to talk shit about minorities, and y'all motherfuckers better start looking in their backyards, bro. This shit is not. This poverty shit different. This poverty shit different. Not, yo, even if you buy something, gang, no public bathrooms, no customer bathrooms. I see if I buy, nah, we don't have no bathroom. I said, how y'all got a gas station? Y'all selling people gas, drinks, coffee. Y'all selling motherfuckers big gulps and 40 ounces and 6-packs and shit. Y'all ain't gonna let me use the bathroom? That's crazy to me. I can't piss before I drink this store, boy. That's crazy. I can't take a piss after I drink this Red Bull. That's crazy. Poverty don't discriminate, but people do, unfortunately. That's how poverty keep fucking winning, man. Cause these motherfuckers know who else don't fucking discriminate? Motherfuckers with the money. They don't care who got the money, they want it. They don't discriminate neither. And they getting it too, bro. This shit is crazy. Like, that's not that area where I was at. It was like a nice, decent area. Like, underlying problems, underlying societal issues, bro. Like, and then ironically, like I said, the place I finally got to use the bathroom was a gym, but attached to the gym was a fucking wellness center. I'm pretty sure you know what wellness center is code word for. They ain't doing Pilates in there. They ain't doing yoga and shit. Maybe. That might be one of the classes. But yeah, shit crazy, bro. Like, that shit was... Not to have a blow yours moment. Yo, I am caked up, boy. I got 619 rupees. I'm about to go buy some. I'm about to invest in Hyrule crypto. Get me some yen coin. Yo, what am I? How do I? Yo, I'm gonna have to Google this shit. What time is it? 10:15? 10:57 rather. Eat them, fucking eat them all. Fucking skin, bone, leave nothing. Let nothing go to waste. Let nothing go to waste. Like the mighty buffalo. Like the mighty buffalo. Or let nothing go to waste. I was watching this shit on Instagram. Bro, they ran down and they found two of the dudes from Black Rock. From the He Who Shall Not Be Named. They found two of the CEOs. They found out who they was and was like running behind them, asking them questions and bruh. Everybody in the comments was like, "Up, it's over for these two interviewer niggas. They about to disappear in like a month or two." I'm like, sheesh. We'll see. Stranger things have happened. Yo. Yo. Shit crazy, gang. Shit crazy, gang. And I got a bad habit of getting on my wormhole shit, so I get on the internet and start Googling all that shit and start watching all these videos and start asking all these weird questions and trying to find answers. And you'd be surprised how much information is not as readily as information is available. You'd be surprised how much information is not readily available. You'd be surprised how much that shit you gotta literally fucking connect the dots and draw lines. Like, they do not make that shit easy for you. But once you start to do that, the shit is like ABC. Like, not even, bro. Let me shut up. Yo. Let me shut the fuck up. It's very interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting. I lose nights of sleep doing that shit sometimes. I'll be like, all right, let me take my ass to bed. I gotta go to work in the morning. I ain't got time for this shit. All this useless information. I ain't gonna do nothing with this shit. I ain't starting no fucking revolution. Fucking useless information, just pissing myself off. Just angering me. Oh! Could this be the way? Oh! Bruh, I need some tutelage here. LOL, Virgo bringing in the new economics. Yeah, no, I'm not trying to start none of that here. This not the place for that. Yeah, I throw a few rupees in there. I throw a little dub in there, a little dubski, know what I mean? Little 4 or 5 bombs, know what I mean? What you got for me? I will have a great luck, that's it? Bro, you could have rubbed that on your chest. I get a refund? That's crazy. $20 for to tell me that's expensive ass fortune cookie. Come on, bro. In the hole. Where's that gonna take me? Oh, I'm at the top now. I'm at the top. This is the mountain. Oh. Oh, fuck on your face. This the mountain, ain't it? No, don't jump down there. This the mountain, right? Ain't this it? Ironically enough, you need to swim to the top of the mountain. No! Bombs? No, right? Run to it? Yeah, run into it! Fuck yeah! So what's the other ones I could have broke too? What was the other ones? God damn, I could lift. Oh, this is only. This ain't nowhere fucking special. Bro, you fucking suck. Fucking suck penises. I thought this was the top of the fucking mountain, gang. God damn. Sauce me, pop me, Lexi, pop me. Bro, I'm kind of annoyed right now. I thought that was it. I thought that was the one right there. It feels like the one still. It is. Oh no, it's not. Throw an item in? No! Why would you do that? Give it back! Oh shit, bro. So what about throwing that shit? I thought she was gonna keep my fucking what you call it. So how do I pick what I throw? And what do you throw in there? Throw the mushroom in that shit. Bruh. Bruh, I thought they took my fucking bow and arrow, gang. I thought they got me for my bow and arrow, gang. Are you supposed to throw something in here, though? Yeah, throwing at him, yes. Select an item using... Okay. Throw the mushroom. Alright, so that's not it. What you supposed to throw in there? Bruh. Picky ass fairy. Oh, that's not the hole. Dogs, I don't know what to do. I'm gonna have to Google this shit. How long we been streaming for? Bro, I really don't know what to do though. Factuals. Alright, this way, this way, this way. This is the regular way. This is old girl with the with my droga. Dami mo droga. Dami mo droga. Bro, I already gave you one, gang. How many of these should you need? She playing with the pack. I'm about to have somebody pull up on her because she playing with the pack right now. I'm already waiting on the circle back. She playing with the pack. I'm about to have somebody come see her real quick because we don't really play like that. You heard? She playing with that pig deck. I'll drop that off. I need that back when I come through. You know what I mean? You gotta have something for me. You ain't got nothing for me twice? Nah. I gotta have somebody come see you. It's alright though. Don't worry about it. But it's alright, old lady. I'm gonna have Martha and them pull up on you. We'll get Martha and Gina and Pam. Have them pull up on you. Yo, bro, I don't know where to go. I'm literally at a loss right now. I'm confused. Fortune teller. They just want my money. They just want my money. They just want my rupees. They don't tell me nothing good. Bam, bam, bam. Did I try this one already? I think I tried this one already. Yo, like, where am I at even? Way the fuck down there. Did I go in that shit over there? Ah, don't shoot me. Let's see. Let's go around this little. Let's go around here. Hit this. Let me see. Nope, not that. Let's go up, up. Gotta get out of here and run up there, right? So I gotta get out right here. Like I did this. Maybe I didn't. Let's see. Yeah, I feel like I did this. Nope, it's not the map. That's the map. Run this way? Yeah, I came here already. That's why I fucking came out in the first place. And this thing right here. This. Oh yeah, T bitch. You found the ice rod. It's chill magic blast the air. But watch your magic meter. Yo, I got that ice rod, gang. Got that cold stick. Ice cold rod, boy. A fucking ice rod in somebody's ace. Somebody's ace is getting the rod. Whee! Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Don't shoot me, dude. Go in the hole, dude. Somebody's ace is getting the rod. Alright, where we at? Oh my god. Bruh. This might be. How do you get on that freaking mountain? I'm trying to get up to that mountain. You see this pendant right here? I had to get 3 chains. I had to get a dipset chain, a G-Unit chain, and a Rockefeller chain. I got the Rockefeller chain. I got the G-Unit chain. Now I got to get the dipset chain. This is the dipset chain right here. But the dipset chain is located on top of Mount Doom, guarded by Sauron and his fucking demon legions and fucking White Walkers and fucking Dothrakians and the fucking Borg. Fucking phalanx. I can't seem to get, I can't get up this motherfucker. I forget how to get up here. It's a trick to it. And I need to get the Master Sword, but I need to get the 3rd bling bling before I can get the Master Sword. I got 2 bling blings. I need the last piece of bling. I need my 3rd pimp chain. I graduated to complete pimpdom. Bruh. We gonna get it done, Waxy. Not today, not tonight. We ain't gonna get it done tonight. I'm getting tired. I've been up since freaking 7 o'clock this morning. Like I said, I had to take a 3 hour out drive and 3 hour back drive. So I've been up since fucking 6 to 7 this morning. It's been a long day. Your boy getting a little sleepy here. My eyes probably look crazy. I probably look tired, right? Look at me. Look at me. I'm probably like a sleepy old man, huh? Ugh. I sure live sleepy. Oh my God. Ooh. Tired, boy. It's about that time. Oh, it's about that time. I'm gonna take a poop. I'm gonna give this 10 more minutes. I'm trying to wrap my head around this shit real quick. That mind where I went before is something like that, where you look up and the next thing you know you hear and you just move some rocks and you're inside the fucking shit. I think. Or I don't know, bro. I feel like I have to go to the fucking dark world to get up there. But how do I get to the dark world? For some reason, like, I don't know if that was the Zelda after this. To get to the mountain, you had to go through the dark world. I haven't seen nothing about the dark world yet in this game. But I know there's a dark world in this game, but I just haven't seen nothing about it yet. So I'm like, is that not at this point in the story yet? I don't remember this game, bro. I stumbled upon the flippers. I got lucky and got the flippers in the gauntlet, to be honest. I forgot all about them shits. And I don't know how to get this third pendant. But you gotta get these 3 pendants and you gotta go to the dark world and do the same thing but with 3 different items. And then you gotta get the Triforce. Try not to downstream before you do it. God damn, bro. Dang, I really don't know. I really don't know. Like, I'm really confused. I think I done ran around this map like 5 times. The only thing I'm gonna do is just YouTube this shit. Like, how did you get to the mountain on Zelda? On Zelda, fucking. But yeah, it's gonna be another stream for another day. I guess this is gonna be a to be continued. I guess. Cause of Rumina. Yeah. Should I try to find somebody to raid? Oh, duh, Alpha. Duh. So obviously we're gonna raid the homie out. This is gonna be the end of stream, guys. Can I just click his name and just raid him like that? Is that a thing? Back. We raid the homie Alba. The pariah. I'm gonna go up this shit and watch the homie stream anyway. Hold on, I'm gonna go back to my shit, huh? Anybody wants to stick around for the raid, I greatly appreciate it. Show the homie some love. Let's see how we do this raid. Yeah, that's gonna be it, Waxy. We gonna call it. I gotta take my ass to bed. I'm getting tired. That's probably why I can't remember what the fuck I'm supposed to do next. I'm kind of tired. Feeling a little bit of what is it? Fog brain, foggy minded, cloudy brain. What the fuck? So I can't even think. Feeling that like my brain is not really working right now. I need to go rest my body. Hopefully I can do another stream tomorrow. Like I said, I want to do a stream with the homies. Are you in Discord? You're not even in Discord, are you? Actually, you're not in Discord, are you? Mine, you're in Discord. Bro, we need to get in Discord, bro, so we can link and do some gamage together, bro. Wow. All right, well, let me stretch. Let me save this game real quick because I'm not doing all of this again. Push triangle. Triangle again. Start. Should I just die? I'm just gonna die. That's the quickest way to fucking make it safe, right? Suspend, say, suspend millions, load. Oh, you could do save points in this shit? Do it again. That's kind of sweet. Will I actually save though? Cause fucking Switch be on that bullshit. That shit don't save. Don't like to save your game. Right, kill me so I could save and quit. Kill me, guys, just in case. Thank you, I appreciate y'all. Alright, how do we do raid? Alva? It's capital A. Oh, y'all can kill me again. I didn't say kill me twice, fucking assholes. Kill me while I'm trying to raid the homie. That's weak sauce. Look, weak. Hopefully that works. Let me copy his name. I'll have to type that shit again. Copy. No? How do you do raids? Oh, it's like that. My bad. What? H. My bad. Alba. Yay! I be raiding the homie Alva. Yo, I appreciate y'all. Scuffy and shit. Y'all already know. With the game over screen. Yeah, fuck you too. We're gonna save and quit. We off this next time. I'll catch y'all. Appreciate y'all. Everybody that came through, chill with your boy. Everybody that's gonna watch the video a little bit later. All that good shit. I appreciate y'all. Scuffy and shit. Y'all already know. We all we got. Your boy tired. I'll get some sleep, y'all. Later.